All right, thanks. Good afternoon and welcome to the UG's Facebook Live event on the future of the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. My name is Bridgette Cobbins, the Interim Assistant County Administrator, and with me today is Doug Bach, our County Administrator, who began his career with the City of Kansas City, Kansas in 1990. Doug, a lot of people may not know the role and responsibilities of the County Administrator. Can you tell us what you're responsible for as the County Administrator? Looks like you're muted, Mr. Bach.
Thank you, Bridgette. That's a good way to start off this session. How are you today? Good to be here.
Fine.
It's good to get on and talk a little bit about the chief of police process. And you're right. I think that's one thing when I'm out and around the community, it's explaining how the unified government works is one thing, but also talking about the role of the county administrator. In many communities, they will call a city manager in place. When we consolidated our governments, we came at a point of having the unique position of needing a county administrator and a city manager. And so the position was named county administrator. By the nature of the position, I am the chief appointed position by the mayor and the county commission. And with that, it's my responsibility to oversee the day-to-day operations of our government. So one of the big operational things is hiring personnel to come in. So from that, I'm able to, or I need to hire all the department heads. Hence, the chief of police is one of the largest departments we have in the unified government, and it's my responsibility to go through the process of recruiting and hiring the chief of police. It makes it pertinent to the conversation today.
Right. So also joining us is the interim Kansas City, Kansas Police Chief, Michael York. He started as the interim chief in September of 2019 and has been with the KCK Police Department since 1992. So today we're going to be talking about some of the work that's being done in the KCK Police Department. We're going to explore how policing has changed, and we're going to preview what is on the horizon for the police department. So to get us started, my first question is going to go to you, Chief. And that question is, in 2020, the police departments across the country came across great scrutiny as the public demanded that the police departments take a closer look at their policies and their procedures. In light of the events, what would you share with us as an overview of how the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department operates?
Well, Bridgette, let me first say I agree with you when you say it was a very challenging year. For 2020, we went through COVID, obviously, and then through George Floyd. It was probably the most challenging year I've ever had on the police department. But you know, when it comes to the COVID issue, we stepped through that. We were able to get our officers some protective equipment to keep them healthy, keep them safe. So we had the PD was not really impacted by COVID like other police departments were. And you know, I attribute that to the unified government getting the officers their protective equipment and keeping them healthy. So, you know, for 2021, we're looking at, we're down on staffing. We have about 320 officers currently. We have 12 officers in the academy getting ready to graduate in May. Our officers stay very busy out there. They average about 415 calls a day. So as a police department, we average about 415 calls a day. So, you know, that's close to 150,000 a year that we get for calls for service. Very few of those calls for service end up in actual arrest. So about 3% of those calls for service end up in an actual arrest. And from there, very, very few of those arrests end up in some type of use of force. So less than 3% end up in a use of force situation when it comes to an arrest. So I think we're doing very good there. I will tell you this, in 2020, our internal affairs complaints are down for 2020. So that was, that's a great sign that we're doing what we need to be doing out there, following our policies. Each officer is trained in de-escalation. When it comes to active listening, we train our officers to listen, to slow things down, and to recognize when a person is suffering from some type of mental crisis. So we train officers in all those type of areas. So we slow things down, and we're less likely to use force when we slow things down and evaluate what's in front of us. I will tell you, as we move forward in 2021, we will still keep with our accreditation. We are CALIA accredited, which stands for Certified Accredited Law Enforcement Agency, which that means we update our policies on a yearly basis. If you guys have seen the push for the 8 Can't Wait, I have that here with me right now. I will tell you, we have been doing those things when it comes to 8 Can't Wait since about 2000. So we are in line with the 8 Can't Wait. In 2020, I did tweak the policy when it comes to our duty to intervene. So we already had that written down in policy, but I made it very clear in our code of ethics policy that officers have a duty to intervene. When an officer is charged and he's not thinking clearly and he's upset, that other officer must step in and intervene. And not just officer to officer, officer to sergeant, sergeant to captain. When you work the streets, you come across situations that you can become very emotional. It's up to someone that is not in the mix of it to step in and to intervene. So we have put that in policy, and we've just tweaked that policy really, because we had it all along. I just made it very, very clear on the duty to intervene. So I think, Bridgette, I think that answers your question. That wraps it up, I believe.
Yeah, it does. So Doug, how do you think these efforts that the chief has just mentioned by the KCKPD, how will it impact our overall quality of life in Wyandotte County as it relates to the residents and the businesses?
Bridgette, there's a lot of things about what the police department does, and I would say just our overall public safety efforts do to impact the quality of life. I mean, I think the number one thing for quality of life is how someone feels, their comfort level of living in the community. And of course, probably the biggest influence in that is if they don't have crime or anything or incidents in their neighborhood, well, that's a high quality of life effort. Though we do know in a lot of areas in our community, we do have incidents and crime activity going on. And it's from there that they look to our police department, our law enforcement to step up and make them feel safe. In order to feel safe about the activity of the police department, you have to have a high level of confidence in the officers that are serving our community. And I think what the chief has done is he's gone through and he's outlined many of the steps we've taken over the years to really engage and interact with the community. So I think as I've gone through for my career, and especially in the last year when I'm going through this chief of police process, a lot of high comments come from the community about what we're doing with community policing and the need for community policing that engage with residents, engage with businesses. That's a quality of life factor, because then they have that relationship now built with the officers in the street, and they have a confidence in the work they're doing. So many of our residents don't know what the policies are. There's a national narrative out there about doing things that the chief has spoke about, the chokehold, the 8 Can't Wait issues that are procedures that are in place. They don't know that we haven't had that. And for most of the officers, their entire career working with us, we didn't have a chokehold type allowable process in taking down somebody. I mean, as the chief said, that's over 20 years that's been changed for us. So it's communicating this information out to our residents. So they feel better about the work we're doing. And I think that continues to go on from a day to day. So as we build our relationships with everybody, as we communicate with the residents, they feel better about what's going on in public safety within the unified government, within Kansas City, Kansas, particularly when we're talking about the chief of police, to understand what we're doing. Some of the other things that the police department gets involved in is our light removal. I mean, that's kind of a side thing. We're working hard through our public works department and our parks department to do what we can to clean up our community, to beautify areas we have. We have a lot of people that continue to violate this, and that's something where we have cameras set up in different areas of the community. We can capture people that are doing that. We've got a number of people doing that kind of thing this year. That improves our quality of life. So it's not just, it's one, the feeling of what's going on to prevent crime in our community. It's also doing things that make us feel better about the overall look and feel of our community. And that's where our police department steps up and takes a lot of activity to do that.
Okay. So Chief, Doug just mentioned briefly about relationships. And how does the KCK PD manage its relationships with the public? I mean, I know there's been a lot of discussion, just not only here, but nationwide, with how some in the general public may misconstrue, or they may have their own opinions on the police department as a whole. So what examples can you share of how this has positively impacted the department's ability to serve our community?
Well, I will tell you this, one of the best things that the KCKPD ever did was in 1995 when they adopted the community policing philosophy. And that meant taking 20 of our street officers and putting them into the community policing unit. At the time, I thought, wow, that's not the best idea that I could think of, but over time, since 1995, we've had an officer assigned to each neighborhood in this city. Each district in this city has a community policing officer who does nothing but work with the community. Positive engagement, helping out people that need help when it comes to neighborhood issues. And that is years and years of positive interactions. My point in that is, when the George Floyd incident occurred, we had protests here in our city, but they were all peaceful protests. We got a great community here, and I really think that by adopting the community policing philosophy and having a standalone cops unit, which is not common throughout the metro, that has paid dividends over the years. And to network with the community, to network with the community groups, it's just one of the best things that we ever did. And it showed during the George Floyd incident. So I would say another thing that we're doing, which I truly believe is just as good as the community policing unit, is our Police Athletic League. We adopted the Police Athletic League a little over 2 years ago. And we don't have a whole lot of juvenile engagement when it comes to what the kids can do in the city. By having this Police Athletic League, this is the next best thing, to engage the youngsters, let them see how police officers work, to engage them when it comes to, the boxing lessons and they do archery, they do chess, they have a community garden, they have a food pantry, and they're interacting with police officers day in and day out. I truly believe the POW will be just as successful when it comes to juvenile engagement as the COPS unit was when it comes to community engagement.
So what are the age groups that participate in this program? If someone's jumping in and they're not quite sure, What are the age groups? What population are we trying to target?
Well, anybody inside of KCK. Even, I'm sure as one can be, that we even have kids probably from other cities that come and want to be part of our PAL. But every kid, I think the earliest, the youngest, I guess, would be anywhere between 8 to 10, all the way up until 18 to 20. So it runs a gamut. I mean, they're not going to turn away a kid. If a kid wants to come in there and wants to learn how to box, or wants to learn how to work the computer, or wants to learn how to paint, we're even going to the point to the extent of we are trying to get a program put together, which I know is going to happen sooner than later, that we're going to teach these young kids how to drive, a driver's ed program for the PAL. So that's something that's coming in the near future. So it's every kid inside of Kansas City, Kansas. We all know the PAL is located on 5th Street there, 5th and Barnett, and they're open Monday through Friday. So I would invite anybody in the neighborhoods to sign your kid up for PAL.
I'd probably add to that too, as we talked about some of the things of the PAL Center from the beginning, kind of but changed a structure that was becoming a blight in our community. I mean, it was a former church, a beautiful building, but it was looking like it was going to fall down. And when the group came in there and started to renovate that facility, they cleaned it up, they cleaned up the area around it. So not only have they provided inside a great place for kids to go, but they've also helped the surrounding neighborhood around it. So that's removing what could have become a very big blight for our community, now being a place of pride. Great piece of architecture and history in our community.
Right. So Chief, you talked about technology being a source at the PAL facility. Technology can be a tool to help create a more efficient department. How has the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department leveraged new technology?
So the biggest thing we've done lately, and it took a while to get it done, but I thought we're very methodical with our approach, and we took our time and we picked the right vendor and the right product for KCKPD, and that's the body worn camera. So that is, I think that's one of the best tools we have. I mean, it shows day in and day out that our officers are doing the right thing. And if our officers step out of line, well, that's going to show that as well. So the officers have embraced it. The officers want to wear their cameras. So I just think that moving forward is just going to help open the lines of communication between us and the community. We're going to be able to take those videos and either show what the officer did right and train the other officers on how to do it right. And we're going to show how we did it wrong. And that's going to be a learning curve for us. So, if you have a video there where the officer made a mistake, well, we're going to show that to the other officers so they can learn from that. So the body worn camera is a big thing going on right now. We're fully operational. Every officer on the streets has a body worn camera. A couple other things we're doing I just want to make mention of real quick. We do have our Street Smart software coming to the PD in the next 6 months. And this is another great tool for us to have. So Street Smart will enable us to talk to other jurisdictions. So if there's something that happened in Missouri, there's a shooting in Missouri, our officers with the Street Smart software will have it at their fingertips. So it will help with officer safety, obviously, and it will also help with hopefully locating the bad guy who's responsible for that particular shooting. So this is the first time in the 30 years that I've been here that we are actually able to communicate with Kansas City, Missouri up to the minute. Something happens in KCK, KCMO knows about it. Something happens in KCMO, we know about it. So to be able to share information like that, it's just a great step in protecting the community. A couple other things we're doing. We're also sharing our cameras with Kansas City, Missouri, as well as Johnson County. So they can look at our cameras and we can look at their cameras. Again, information sharing. And this is just not solving crimes. We're able to help locate missing persons. So when we have a vehicle and that vehicle goes through our license plate reader, we can track that vehicle and know where that vehicle is. So if it's a missing person, we can locate that missing person. Or if it's a homicide suspect, we can locate that vehicle. Just recently, we were able to solve a homicide with our license plate readers. So, we were able to figure out who did it, what kind of car was involved, and locate the suspect within a couple of days, all because of the license plate reader. So great technology that we have when it comes to, solving crime and really assisting with community efforts of, like I said, locating missing or endangered citizens.
Chief, as you've moved forward with the technology, I have to point out the support that we've had from Mayor Alvey and the Unified Government Commission, because all these things that we're doing and buying when the new initiatives come forward is they're giving us the financial support to buy all this equipment. And as the chief talked about moving forward with body worn cameras, there were federal grants out there, but our police department was smart enough to go through, do a lot of research on it, and the grants will pay for buying a camera, but they don't pay for what the cost is to really operate the system, to have all the recording equipment to go through to put it in play. And in order to do this and make it sustainable in our department, we had to invest a lot. One of the first investments before we bought a camera was to connect fiber across our community. This would make for a very dynamic system. So we had to connect our facilities from east to west, north to south, really running fiber through all parts. Now, a good thing that added to that was by partnering up with a private sector firm in Unite that would come through and put the fiber down. It also provided economic development opportunity across our community to bring in for businesses to hook to that and go with as we connected all of our facilities. And there's some payback that we get from that as private businesses connect into it. Some of there's cost avoidance that we had or money that we would get back in doing that. So it was a good private public partnership to make that happen. One of the key components that then we went out for bid and did the body worn camera project, and it's now fully operational this year. And as the chief said, some of the comments I heard back from some officers, I think there's some that questioned it, others, many of them really appreciate it because they're doing their job, and to be able to get out there and show just how it's being done. And I really like the comments the chief makes on training, because as we look at some of our new development projects in sports related areas where we have with Home Field coming in with what they're doing, what Sporting Kansas City has done, they use cameras all the time. They have cameras set up all over their fields. They film people, they see what they do, how they do it right and wrong. So it's not just a tool that we use per an incident to say, did we do this right or wrong? And then we want to prove it back to the public. There's the training aspect that the chief can bring back in. And I really appreciate his comments on that as we look to that. And then all the many other things he's pointed out from the cameras throughout the community that we're going to be able to use. All this going on, all the video age that we have today, I think just adds to a lot of the stress that our officers are undergoing. I think that's something that our new chief has to continually stay in place with. I know Chief York has. Our officers are involved in a lot of high stress situations. Anytime you pull out a firearm with the intent to shoot, or somebody is shooting at you, that causes a trauma that most people don't have to deal with. And I think that's a part of our mental health that we've been working with. Bridgette, I know since you came in the Interim Assistant County Administrator position, it's been in fact, I've had you look into this. working with not just the police department, but also with the sheriff and the fire department about what we can do to assist with the mental health concerns that are and well-being that our public safety people have. And probably a good time for you to talk a little bit about that and let everybody know what we're doing and any of our officers that are tuning in.
Right. So yes, 2020 was a year that we'll never forget. I mean, we've learned a lot about anxiety and stress. So the police department will be deploying an app that's called Cortico. And what Cortico is it's a law enforcement app that gives officers, their family, non-sworn police staff, retired officers in hand, on demand, and easy access to a multitude of high-quality wellness tools and resources for the public safety personnel to access it. It's easily for them to track it, and it's confidential. It's a 24-hour, 7 days a week app, and it's available 365 days a year on their cell phone. This app is an app that works day and night to accommodate the varying shifts for the police, fire, and the sheriff's department. Our officers are tasked with handling the most high-risk, urgent, and dangerous events in our communities and on a daily basis. So Cortico can help our officers cope with the effects of critical events and chronic exposure. So this wellness app, some of the things that it offers is it offers support and resources for emotional health, depression, family support, injury prevention, post-traumatic stress, suicide prevention, and also a feature that I think is really important is that it's supporting their kids who fear that their parents' safety, they fear that their parents' safety while they're serving our community. It offers them a work-life balance and an array of other resources. It will improve the officer's decision-making ability with empathy and resiliency, which in turn, it ultimately will provide the police and the community with better relationships. So we're really excited about this app. A lot of our neighboring municipalities are also jumping on board with it. But the best thing about it is that it will give the officers and their families and our retired and non-sworn staff the ability to have something in their hand that they can immediately get any type of support from any time of the day. And it's layered on additional services that the unified government offers to all of our employees as well. But I think it's going to be a tool that's really going to be a benefit to all of our public safety employees and their families.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm sure, Chief, you can comment to that. And I will note the police and the sheriff union both have been very instrumental in pushing forward different things here to work with the mental health of all our officers and deputies going through that. Helped us all along the way, looking at different things, offering their comments. So they've been very engaged in this area. And I agree. I think this is one of the best tools that we can put online today. And I really like the aspect that it's in place for those that retire, because you know what's happened with you over your 25 to 30 years in public service doesn't just go away the day you hang up your badge. That's going to be with you. So Chief, I don't know if you have some comments on that or the new system we're bringing online.
Yes, Doug, I mean, it's been a long time coming. I will tell you, for the officers to have this type of app at their fingertips, I mean, a lot of these older guys could have used that back in the day and just didn't have that resource. And it's to be able to use it and your family use it. I mean, it's huge. It's just such a great step in improving morale, efficiency, wellness. As you well know, Doug, we have a full-time wellness officer that's assigned to the chief's office, and that's what she focuses in on, is when officers are struggling or they witness some horrific act, she will reach out to them and offer them resources. So to have a full-time wellness officer, it's we the PD we've embraced that, and just to add on to wellness with this app and with our officer, we have our 2 comfort canines that the officers absolutely love, and they go to roll calls and they just interact with the officers, not just the officers, but the dispatchers that they've got a tough job out there, and they have a stressful job, and we try to get the comfort dogs out there so they can just hang out with the dispatchers, everybody, the admin staff, in our sworn. So all these are the steps moving forward in the right direction and keeping officers healthy.
Chief, I think one of your comfort dogs was in the municipal office building yesterday. So I think they do a lot more than just make your officers feel comfortable. I heard comments back from other employees around here, just seeing them, how they engage. They're really a great addition to the department.
Yeah, there's been other agencies as of late that have gotten on board with the comfort animals. So once COVID, is hopefully lifted and all these restrictions, we'd love to get these animals out to the schools and to the hospitals and to places like that.
So Chief, you talked about what the police department is doing now as it relates to the community and the involvement with the body cameras and the policies and the procedures and the technologies. So how is policing evolving, and what are you doing to prepare us for the future for the police department?
So Bridgette, I really think transparency is everything. The body worn cameras and the community policing and the juvenile engagement officer and the PAL, those are all really good things. But can we improve with transparency? We need to. And what I'm trying to do now, and I'm hoping I can get it accomplished, is I want to get just one piece of transparency here. I want to be able to get our policies on our website so the community can read our policies and know what we do and why we do it. So I think that's a step in the right direction for us when it comes to transparency. I also struggle with hiring. Right now, African Americans and Hispanic officers make up about a quarter of our sworn. And we have about 11% of our sworn are women. We need to do better. I need to do better. The police department needs to do better in hiring more diversity. And we are doing our best when it comes to that now. We've reached out to the ministers around the city, trying to get into their, get into their congregation and talk to them about becoming a police officer. We've gone to the African American colleges. So we're doing different things now to try to get more diversity within the PD. And I think we are moving in the right direction, but it seems to be a slow process. And but that really is one of our major goals for the next several years and beyond, is to create more diversity within the police department. So more transparency when it comes to, we did hire a civilian for the chief's office, and she works our social media side, and she does a great job. So that's normally in the past been an officer that works the social media side. She offers a different perspective when it comes to our social media. So, and she does a really good job in communicating through social media to the public. We, again, Bridgette, we know when it comes to evolving, we deal a lot with people that are in crisis, right? So we have a full-time officer that focuses in on people that are suffering from some type of crisis. We'd like to expand upon that program. We'd like to get a couple officers to do nothing but respond to people that are in crisis. So about 85% of our police department or our sworn officers are CIT certified, and that's a great thing. And our goal is to get 100%, but I really want to tweak this program and try to get when our staffing gets up to where it needs to be to get another full-time CIT officer.
So Chief, what is a CIT? What is that?
So when a person is suffering from, it's crisis intervention. So when a person is suffering from some type of mental issue or under the influence of some type of narcotic or prescribed drugs, whatever the case may be, they're in crisis.
Okay.
So, you know, we go there, again, slowing things down, active listening, being patient. 90% of the time, we're able to get that person some help. The vast majority of the time, we're able to get that person help and not arrest them, because they don't need to be arrested. They need to get help. So that has been a huge help with our officers out there to be certified to recognize the signs when someone's in crisis. That way they know, okay, this person is not, you know, he's not a criminal. He's just in crisis and they need help. So years back, that person would go to jail. Years back, we had no other resources. We would just take them to jail. Now we get them help.
You know, Chief, I think too, the partnership with Wyandotte Behavioral Health in our community has been great for you, because just like you said, years ago, we didn't embrace that the same way. And now we have a close partnership with them, not only with the police department, but also with the Wyandotte County Jail. You know, so it's more of a first thought than it is an afterthought, I think, for our officers, as you've gone through and done such a good job of training, both there and then also what the county does. So I think with Randy Kallstrom and all he does to reach out and I think partner with us has made a big difference too in our community. And it's an area of a future investment for us, because I think it is one that really pays off for our residents in so many ways.
Right. So Doug, we've been talking about the future of the police department, and you've been leading a year-long process to find a new police chief. So what has the process looked like? I mean, what have you learned, and what can the community look forward to in the coming weeks and months?
Well, all right, Bridgette, this is kind of the big question that's out there that a lot of people will see me and ask about, and what's going on with it. As you noted, a year-long process. It really didn't start out to be that. I was planning to start the process early last year, appointing Chief York in as an interim in 2019. And then we thought we'd move in through the process in 2020. However, with COVID and the way things were going in the community, it kind of stopped a lot of what we were doing. We had to refocus our energies. Chief York's been doing a great job as an interim chief, so realized I could hold that out for a little bit longer and then stop, pause for a while and restart. But I did start this process in the early part of 2020. Started doing interviews with community groups, some from livable neighborhoods. I was able to sit down with some representatives of those groups, get their feedback as to what they thought the police department was doing right, and some areas where we needed to improve, put more efforts into. I also sat down and had some meetings with about 40 or 50 different police officers that were expressed their interest when I reached out to them to come in and sit down with me. Had some meetings with some of our command staff and got their input during that time. Then we hit the pause button. During the incidents that happened, I think in reactions to what happened with George Floyd, Mayor Albee started the task force to look at crime, to go in and see how our departments, how the police department is operating, to learn a lot about what the chief talked about today, many of the procedures we had, and also to make some recommendations for things we could do better or change, but to become more enlightened about that as they've gone through it. That task force came out, gave a report back to our governing body in December, to which I was able to hear and get a lot of information from that. We also did a community survey. It's one that was out there last year, but in 2020, we restarted again toward the end of 2020. Had 243 responses to that. Most all of them were from KCK residents. You know, input coming in through that process were things that people were talking about. They really like community policing, our outreach and engagement and youth programs. They liked our response time. Those were some of the top marks that came in. Though they also noticed that trust and transparency was not something that they felt real good about what was happening from KCKPD and where we were with diversity and inclusion. So needing for that increased visibility. So those are areas we have to work on. Those are areas that I stress in going through and talking to candidates to be a new chief of police, that they're thinking about that. Improving those community relations was the #1 item that came up. And I found that interesting, especially if I look at the survey and then also look back to what came in through the neighborhood group meetings. Those groups always pointed to the community policing officer as a top thing we're doing in the community, but they also came to the point that we needed to do more of it. Now, that group was, I would say, very informed about where we are with law enforcement. They noted that the struggles we're having with recruiting, getting people into the department and where we are. So you can't have everybody out there spending 20 minutes, 30 minutes talking to people throughout the day. They've got to move and respond to calls for service. But they also said that's really the best area that we can invest in, is getting more officers out there for that community relations standpoint. So those were a couple of the big ones, that transparency of what our department's doing, what our plans are, building those community relations and working toward those efforts to help reduce the crime is how we thought they would come together. On the actual process itself, I started recruiting, opened the recruitment process up toward the end of last year, hired a national search firm in SGR. They helped us bring in candidates for that. Went through resumes, narrowed the list down, started to do a series of interviews. We did some video interviews with candidates to get some initial response, narrowed the list from there, did some virtual. Today's virtual environment, I guess, has assisted with that. So we were able to talk to some candidates. We also had them doing questionnaires, filling out information, getting their thoughts on different items as we went through this. And I do a lot of background check work. As we've talked about, today's world of social media, you can find out a lot on social media. So you can look at all different platforms, get information on that, review it, see how candidates have acted out there, and what they've done over the course of their career. It's pretty much online to go through and review a lot of that information. So taking that information, I'm now at a point of I'm ready to narrow the list down to candidates to bring in for an assessment center, which we'll be doing on April 15th of this coming month. And part of that process will include, I will bring together a blue ribbon committee of community representatives. I'm going to start to reach out and contact people to be part of that now. They'll be able to watch how the candidates behave and perform during the assessment center, and we put them through a series of exercises where we see how they act in high stress situations, how they engage with other people that could be more like department heads or elected officials. And speaking of elected officials, they will get to talk to our mayor and commission and answer some questions of them. But I go back to the Blue Ribbon Committee and let them offer feedback to me and let me know how they thought candidates performed. Ultimately, though, after all of that input, that is a decision that I have to make as to who we think will be the best fit for our community, the right person to come in and be the next chief of police. And I hope everyone understands it's not one that I take lightly. It's one that I feel a large part of my responsibility is about making this right choice for the future of our community. And so people know Chief York has not applied for this position. He is looking at greener pastures to the future, so he's not in the process as we're going through, and which makes him a great asset to me in working through this and being able to talk to him and get his input and as we move through different things. So the process is moving along. It's been very good, and I have received a lot of good input today. And ultimately, I plan to be able to appoint and announce a new chief in May of this year.
Thank you. So we do have one question that came in online that I'd like to read for you and the Chief, Doug. And it states that public safety is not just about law enforcement. Can you share a bit about how the unified government is approaching public safety from a variety of perspectives, including public health, blight remediation, illegal dumping, etc.?
Well, sure. And I think we did talk about that a little bit earlier when I was talking about areas of blight remediation. One area that the commission has pushed us on is that what we do in code enforcement. And basically code enforcement's job is to try to get people to comply and clean up more around their own houses. A few years ago, we took this very seriously back as a unified government, wanted to make sure all our buildings are up to standard to where we want them to be. Do more on our city streets. We've also, unfortunately, had the opportunity to acquire a lot of properties over the year because people had left and abandoned those. So we have those in our land bank. We put a lot of effort toward mowing those because when you move through a neighborhood and if it looks like someone cares about that neighborhood, people are more responsible about the way they engage and the way they take care of their own property. And we are seeing a lot more reinvestment in our community now from people doing that, people fixing up older houses, reinvesting from that standpoint. So it is a good point. It's not just the police can be there from the community relations standpoint and they can respond to what's going on, but typically that comes after the crime has occurred. The other steps are ones you can take to prevent the crime from ever occurring, and the steps we can take of being out there, engaging with our neighbors, businesses, and those are things that the officers do. If we can prevent that from happening, then we're way ahead. I don't know, Chief, if you have anything you want to add to that or some of the other key areas you see that help us think about the reduction of crime in our community.
Sure. You know, when it comes to fighting crime, we follow the data. So if a crime is a certain crime or crimes are occurring in a neighborhood, we are going to put more of our resources in that neighborhood. That's the crime fighting initiative we call ICON, which is impacting crime in our neighborhoods. And it's proven when we put officers in the areas that are impacted by crime, just the mere presence of the officer and the squad car reduces crime. So, like I mentioned earlier in this presentation, is that very little of what we do is an arrest, right? So we're mostly out there positively impacting our community with our community engagement. So we absolutely follow the crime, follow the data, and we put our officers in those areas. But again, that's just a small piece of what we do. So you know, I'll give you an example. We spent a lot of time during COVID educating the community and the businesses. We would go out and talk to them about the rules that we had to follow during COVID. And that's just an example of, it's really not police work. That's just educating the community. So I think a big piece of what we do is just that, is positively engaging the community.
So it looks like we're getting ready to run out of time. Was there anything else that you'd like to add, Doug, before I close out and give out some information for how they can contact us if they have any questions?
Hit my mute button again. I would just add that, you know, I think the feedback, the information that I've received from the public, from businesses over the past several months has been very valuable to me. It's information I've brought back into the management team that's assisting with going through this so we can weave this in. What are the high concerns of the community? What are the big concerns of the officers? Those were really good meetings I had with them about what they were concerned about. Now, one thing that's always clear is I can walk into one meeting and I'll get one perspective, and come into another meeting and get a different perspective as to what's the highest importance items or what we should be looking at. But I'm able to bring all that, I think, together as I consider the best candidates that we're looking at for Kansas City, Kansas. And I really look forward to the process that we're going to have toward the middle of May. And if I will continue to take additional input from people if they have it as we go through the process. So thanks for helping us do this today, Bridgette and Chief.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for joining us.
It's really been fun. So we would like to thank each of you for joining us today. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to email us at communications@wykckk.org. Again, that's communications with an S at wykckk.org. And on April the 15th at 5:00 p.m., please join the commission virtually to hear from the candidates for the KCK Police Department Chief. Stay tuned for the announcement, as Doug has mentioned, in May for our next KCK Police Department Chief. Have a great day.